What is up? Nobody's here yet. I'm just talking to myself. What's up, everybody? This debate starts in about 18-ish minutes. I'm always running like a chicken with my head cut off. So I was like, oh, maybe today I'll start a little bit early, kind of give a little prelude to the debate, what we can expect to see. It's my understanding that what's up, Merc? Tonight's debate will not be live checked, like live fact check, like Donald Trump was. So whether or not that actually happens, we'll see. It'll be interesting because it's two women hosting the debate. It'll be interesting to see if we run into a situation where JD Vance is actually debating the moderators instead of Tim Walz, which I could totally see. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm working on bringing everything up for you. I think we're going to watch What's Up, Jake? My man, fighting for the unions today. It's funny sometimes when you and I have like things that we don't see eye to eye on. And I love that we can do that and we don't fight. We're still friends at the end of the day. That's always nice. I'm drinking wine this evening, just so everybody knows. There will be no drinking contest, though. Otherwise, we're fucked. Joey and what's up, Patriot Sports Radio? I believe that is probably Chris joining us in the chat. We're definitely friends no matter what. Got you. And I get to see you in 2 days. So that's super exciting. It is Chris Anderson. All right. Let's see. I think I'm going to do the same thing that I did for the Kamala Trump debate. And I'm going to bring up C-SPAN so that we don't have the moderators. So like where we have essentially like 3 people talking. Jonah, what's up? Good to see you, my man. It's been a long time. I hope you are doing well. Let's bring in the Exit and Joey. I think I said this, but I don't remember if I said it. Will be joining us shortly. I'm not sure where. I know that Joey is eating dinner and Exit is putting the kiddos to bed. So as soon as that's finished, they will be joining me for live commentary of this wonderful debate that we're going to have tonight. Some predictions that I have. You should totally come, Chris. It's a really good time. Good times are had by all for sure. Okay, present, share screen. Give me 5 seconds to put this up here. Share. And it's still not ready to go yet. So we're going to have to wait just a little bit on that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that back down. So some predictions that I have for tonight's debate. So I think the media, so let's talk about media first and then my expectations of the debate itself. I think the media is going to try to frame this given the... So I don't know if I have explained to you guys, but I have like a visceral dislike for the Walz Harris ticket. And I try really hard, like as the debate's taking place, I try to, be fair to both sides, give even commentary as to what I think the strengths and weaknesses of both people are. If you've watched any of my streams, I'm fairly even keeled as far as that goes. But for me personally, my personal opinion, I have a visceral dislike for both of those individuals. Tim Walz is you just had a whistleblower that testified to the DHS about, I don't even know how the man's going to get a security clearance given his ties to China. He took his vacations in China. He got married on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square situation. Like, this man is gung-ho fucking China. And, if you've followed the Thousand Talents plan and what China's objective is, it's essentially to take over the United States without ever having to fire a shot in the process. Well, what do you think happens when you install an incredibly favorable individual into the highest level of government office in the United States? You can just work from within. And so I have a problem with that. I also have a massive problem, personal feelings of the person herself aside, because I don't know Kamala. I've never met her in person. I only know the persona that she puts out wherever she's speaking, the chameleon type, like where she changes depending on who she's talking to. But what I do know is that she did not receive a single vote in this primary. She is an installed candidate. She is the antithesis of the constitutional republic that we live in and the democratic process of electing individuals to serve this country. And so I just, for those two reasons alone, those are my personal feelings about this particular candidacy. And don't get me wrong, I have huge problems with Trump as well. I'm not going to dive into that here at this moment, but I recently watched Hillbilly Elegy, and I am getting ready to read the book with Liberty Library, which is a book club that we host. And just to kind of get an idea of who he was as a kid growing up, like what kind of guy is he? He's only been a senator for 2 years. So he's certainly virginal when it comes to politics and things like that. And, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like these career politicians, I'm not a huge fan. I'm really looking forward to reading the book because, as we all know, the movie never quite conveys the book the same way as, what you get when you read it. So I'm really looking forward to diving into like the story from his perspective instead of the Hollywood kind of glamorized version of it. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. Going back to this debate, the media has been framing Tim Walz as this like schmucky, blue collar, I'm one of you guys kind of dudes, and I'm just a dad and a grandpa. And like, I don't know if he is a grandpa, but that's kind of like how they've been framing him, as this gentle soul and soft and kind. And, I think that's been for two reasons. Number one, it's like, don't pay attention behind the curtain. Like, don't look at the fact that I've been in politics since 2007. Nothing but a drain on fucking society. Oops, sorry for the language. Get your kids out of the room at this point. And then they also want to help make Kamala seem more presidential. And the way to do that is you have a soft man. You can make her look like a prosecutorial, strong woman and boss babe president. I'm able to handle all the Putins and Xi Jinpings of the world. Like that's the contrast that they're trying to create within their own campaign. The problem is they're failing miserably at that. They just both look incompetent at this point. So they're framing Walz as this soft character and JD Vance as this Ivy League, because I think that they're actually genuinely afraid of how Walz is going to perform in this debate against JD Vance. And, there are some things that I'm worried about JD Vance coming out with, right? Like, he has hardline positions as far as the family and abortion, and you can agree to disagree with those positions, but it's, it's a way, and I'm constantly thinking about like the questions that are going to come out. What does the soundbite look like on the back end, and how is the media going to frame what they're discussing in these situations? And so I'm mindful of that constantly. So what's going to come out of this debate is, oh, look at Tim Walz. He's just one of you. He's just a regular old American. And JD Vance is this Ivy League trained attorney. And he he was mean to Tim Walz. You even heard it on The View, which ashamedly, I follow The View so fucking closely, and I'll tell you why. They are single-handedly ruining this fucking country, in my opinion. The white suburban woman who's sitting at home watching daytime TV, tuning into The View, is the most misinformed populace alive, because they're able to get on that show and say and do whatever they want to do, and they have no repercussions for it, which, that's free speech. But the lack of willingness to step outside of that and say, that doesn't sound right. Let me go check and see if I can find another source that backs this up. And so I have a huge problem. So anyway, I watch it very closely, and every day they are railing on JD Vance. And just yesterday or this morning, I think it was yesterday, because I didn't do any Twittering today. They were talking about the debate, and they're like, I don't even need Tim Walz to come out there and answer any questions. I just need him to be a kind, nice man. And it's like, bitch, he is number 2 in line for the fucking presidency. Like, you need somebody who can handle their shit in a little bitty debate. Like, there's no question about that. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to come to some of these comments. Me too, says Merck. 100%. Not sure what that's on, but probably the visceral reaction. He's a CCP agent. I agree. I think that he is compromised. What's up, Tex? Good to see you. Thank you. For all intents and purposes, this is a wig again today because I did not have time to fix my hair. So I apologize for the deception, but I have them, so why not wear them? Hasn't Vance been critical of Trump? There's something they can legit throw at him. I don't know that he's necessarily been critical. I don't know that I would use that language. He has certainly challenged or drawn a line between where his position is versus where Trump's is. I think that these moderators tonight are going to try to pigeonhole Vance into certain positions that Trump takes that he may not necessarily agree with. So we'll see how he's able to navigate that and kind of, not separate himself, but like say, hey, I'm a free thinking individual. Here's how I feel about this versus here's how Trump would handle this. Or I can't speak for Trump, I think is probably how he would most gracefully handle some of those situations. We'll see. FML facts. Yes, The View fucking sucks. I'm glad we are all on the same page. Their whole campaign is about feelings, joy, and being nice and shit. So another thing that their campaign about is pretending that they are not in office right now. It is, I have sat and I think about things, right? I think about how I am deep in this, right? Like I am heavy into politics. I eat, sleep, and breathe it. And I understand that the general American public is not in that position. They don't do the same thing that I do. But with that being said, it is very clear, like the turn the page, going forward. We're not going back. Even on The View, they were like, I want to bring decency back to this position. Talking about the vice presidential debate. What the fuck are you talking about? Kamala Harris is the vice president. So you're wanting to bring back decency. Are you saying she's fucking indecent? Because we can agree on that. Like, so it's so bizarre to me, this idea that you haven't been, go back and look at the legacy of the presidential, vice presidential position, going all the way back to, you've got Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama. Then you've got this little stint of 4 years of Trump, and then you have Biden. And Biden was part of the Obama administration. There's it's almost monarchy like you're just passing it on through generationally. And now you're like, oh, that 4 years blurb of Donald Trump ruined the entire world for this whole time. Like, you're pretending you're not there right now. Oh, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to take care of this. You have had 3.5 years to do that. Why? How is it possible that people are letting them pretend that they had no role or responsibility in running the government for the last 3.5 years? It's drives me insane. All right, let's see if I can get this to come up now. Maybe. Nope. I guess it's not going to start till right at 9, so we got about 2 minutes left. Project 2025. I'm so tired of Project 2025. Ukraine, abortion, January 6th, same drum they always hit. So it'll be interesting. If they bring up Ukraine tonight, I hope JD Vance slams the fuck out of this administration. And I know that Tim Walz isn't part of it, but he is going to be on Harris's ticket. And the idea that on the same day that 3 states have entire cities that are completely decimated, and something not talked about and not thought about very much is those homes in Appalachia, they likely did not have flood insurance. That's not like a go-to coverage for you to have in the fucking mountains. So those towns, cities, homes, businesses, that decimation will not be covered by insurance. It's going to have to be covered by federal funds and state funds. And the really big problem is that on the same day that happens, you can go through the feeds and see, oh, we're giving $8 billion more to Ukraine. I hope the topic of Ukraine comes up, because I would not a fucking penny more should go to another foreign entity until our own business is in order, in my opinion. Humble opinion. Can't take 4 more years of this. I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message. Thank you, PSR. What's up, tags? Fucking Biden telling us American citizens need to pay for their recovery. Well, I mean, we do in the long run. It's just a matter of, why is this not coming on? It does come on at 9, right? Like, I'm not crazy. Are they starting late? I might have to go somewhere else if... Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Follow and engage with C-SPAN on Twitter, Instagram.
I need a thumbs up. Can you guys hear this okay?
Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator JD Vance of Ohio.
Now, this is likely the final debate of this election cycle, and voting is already underway in 20 states. CBS News polling shows this remains a race either presidential candidate could win. The CBS News vice presidential debate starts now.
Fight for every single vote, and we're going to take this country back.
And we are ready to continue to build the future together.
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
This is a CBS News special, live from CBS News headquarters in New York. America Decides, the vice presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator JD Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
Look at the awkward head nods.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate
Somebody
will
keep
get
track
another
of time.
minute to make further
That would be
points,
awesome.
with an
I would love
additional
to see
1
that.
minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set.
It's like
Governor,
NBC
Senator,
jab,
thank
jab,
you for joining us. Let's get
or
started.
ABC.
Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Oh my God, he looks so scared.
But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is
like he's
that
about to
steady
eat it.
leadership is going to matter.
He really does.
Clear, and the world
he was
saw
waiting
on
for
that
this question.
debate
They
stage a
must
few
have,
weeks
must
ago.
have gotten
A
last
nearly
minute prep in.
80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together.
Go in hard. You want to talk about
Understanding
credibility?
that our allies matter.
Oh, he's about to
When
pounce.
our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea. When we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Oh, what's up, Rudy?
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American
That's a
dream is
good
going to be
play
attainable
to
once again.
redraw
Now, to
attention
answer
to the
this
fact that
particular
they're
question, we have
already
to
in
remember
power.
that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
He's a lawyer. That's
Thank
the
you,
first thing I think
Senator.
everybody needs to
Governor
remember.
Walz,
Is
do
that
you care
JD
to
Vance is
respond
first
to
and
any of
foremost
the
a lawyer, so
allegations?
he probably has
Donald
had,
Trump
I don't know if he's had
was in
litigation
office. We'll
experience,
sometimes hear
but
revisionist history, but when
he's in
Donald
his
Trump
element
was in
right
office,
here.
it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump
JD Vance
pulled
will
that
be president of
program
the
and
United
put
States
nothing else in its
at some
place.
point in
So
time.
Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than
You know
they
something
ever
I agree
were
with you. I
because
think
of
he's the
Donald Trump's
president.
fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American
Thanks,
aircraft
Jake.
in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle.
He, that? I don't remember that.
Never has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you
Well, we're going to
witnessed
make up
today,
stuff
like
tonight,
you
so it's
witnessed
all
in
fine.
April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out?
He looks like he is just begging for him to say something he can hang on
Gentlemen, we
to.
have a lot to get to. Nora?
Problem is, JD Vance is moving
Let's
very
turn now
quickly.
to Hurricane Helene.
Point by
The
point.
storm could
He's
become
built for
one of
this.
the deadliest on record. More than 160
I'm glad they're
people
talking
are
about
dead
this.
and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic
JD Vance is not going to
rainfall.
lose his cool the way
Senator
Trump
Vance,
does.
according to CBS
So
News polling, 7
those types
in
of
10
techniques are not going
Americans
to work here.
and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45
I haven't seen
favor
Vance
the
write
U.S. taking
anything down
steps to
yet.
try and reduce climate change.
Had grandpa in
Senator,
a
what
panic when it turned out
responsibility
he can't
would
dad
the
joke
Trump
his age.
administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of two grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child. And it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people
that
lost
was the
their
most
lives. And I'm
heartbreaking
sure
story
Governor
I've
Walz
heard.
joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people. Our prayers go out to them. And we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible. And then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally. And
It's a weird
Appalachia,
tie.
all across the
I'll give you
Southeast,
that.
they need their government to do their job. And I commit that when
He
Donald
should've
Trump
worn
is
it tomorrow.
president
It would've
again,
been
the
Wednesday.
government will put
You can
the
wear pink on
citizens of
Wednesday.
this country first when they suffer from a disaster. And Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true.
Weird
well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing
Walz
as
can't
possible,
keep up.
and you'd want to
Like, that's
produce
what
as much
that's what it's
energy
coming
as
off
possible
as.
in the United States of
JD Vance
America
has not
because
written
we're
down
the
something
cleanest
this whole
economy in the
time.
entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that,
Seriously,
I mean
Walz looks
the
like he's
amount
gonna
of
cry.
carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about
God,
getting
he's
cleaner air
fucking
and cleaner
brilliant,
water,
man.
the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American
JD
workers
Vance needs to
and the
do
American
Donald
people. And
Trump's
unfortunately,
debate prep.
Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor
That's
Walz, you have 2
assuming
minutes
Trump
to
would
respond.
listen.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve
I was
as
hoping that he would talk about
co-chair
nuclear
of the Council
energy.
of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure
What
they're
does this
there
have
so
to
that
do
we
with
recover.
climate
But
change?
we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying
He's
there,
running
staying
cover for
focused.
Kamala
Now,
and the
look,
lack
coming
of
back to the
response.
climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything
That's true.
we've seen.
No, Cole has a point.
Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront
You're right,
property
cool.
to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive
Ooh, he
investments, the
fucked up.
biggest in global history that we've seen
Harris
in the Inflation
administration.
Reduction Act has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio.
Can he
taking
recover?
EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters?
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump
Solyndra.
called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats Democrats will use here. I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar
Tim
panels
Walz
that are
looks
made in China, number
mesmerized
one, you're
with
going to make the
JD
economy
Vance.
dirtier. We
He's
should be
looking at him
with the solar
in
panels that are
like
in the United
almost
States
like
of
in
America.
awe. Like is
Some
that
of them
what
are,
you're
Yeah.
but
getting?
a lot of them are being made overseas
Like
in
he's
China,
been caught off
especially
guard
the
by him.
components that go into those
Like
solar
he
panels. So if you
admires
really
him.
want to make
Mm-hmm.
the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more
Are
energy
you picking
production.
up on that,
We haven't
Rudy?
He's
built a
sitting
nuclear
there
facility, I
going,
think, one in the past 40 years.
motherfucker, I'm
Natural
gonna vote for
gas,
you.
we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing it
Senator,
against
your
the
time
climate.
is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look,
Probably how I'm
we're
looking at him,
producing more
actually.
natural gas than we ever have. There's no
I'm really
moratorium on that.
impressed
We're
with him.
producing more oil.
A
But
good
folks
public
know,
speaker.
and
I didn't realize he was.
like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation
Sorry
in
if
the
Hector's
future.
watching,
How
but
do we
no one
make
gives
sure
a
that we're
shit about
protecting by burying
Minnesota.
our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing.
Yes, Tim.
creating
Let's
those
talk
jobs
about
right here.
getting money to run
Governor,
for
your
office
time is
from
up. The
shady
overwhelming
sources. Let's
consensus
have that
among scientists
conversation.
is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American
Just
voters.
don't say that they're eating dogs
Senator
and cats,
Vance,
please. And then
your campaign
They're
is
eating the
pledging to carry
dogs.
out the largest
they're
mass
eating the cats.
deportation plan in American history
They're eating the
and
pets.
to use the U.S. military to do so.
Heather can't put
Could you
that
be
one
more
up on
specific about
YouTube.
exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are
really
here in the
good on the
country.
border.
What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, Do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things?
Looks like, please get me out of here.
The drug mule's not true.
Did he
but I will
just
say
whoa,
about this,
whoa, whoa,
about
whoa?
because this is a crisis.
Did he
It's the
just
opioid
adjust
crisis,
an
and the good news
earpiece?
on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history.
Hold on.
30% decrease.
I don't
in
know if I
Ohio,
can
but there's
rewind.
still
I'm
more
gonna
work to
I'm
do.
gonna risk
But
it
let's go
really
back to
fast
this on immigration.
because
Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state, a border state in California. She's the one to solve this. Of us want to solve this,
son of a bitch.
and that is the United
Won't
States
let me.
Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce.
I'm sure
That's
Twitter's
most
all over it,
Americans
though.
out here. That's why we had the fairest and the
Oh,
toughest
okay.
bill
Thanks, guys.
on immigration that this nation's
No,
seen.
he was like, it looked like he
was
was scratching
crafted
or
by
something.
conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle. Wants to get it
He's
done.
a piece of
Democrats
shit.
and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said this is what we need in here. These are the experts.
Oh, yeah, that's yours,
and
right,
the
Rudy?
Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal
I
said,
don't claim him.
pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to
All right,
pass,
guys,
and
I
I
We
gotta
just
bounce.
don't want them brought in
Donald
the
Trump said
first
no.
fucking place.
told them to vote against it.
Thanks for letting me hang
because
out,
it
Heather.
gives him a campaign
I'll see you in a
issue. It gives
couple
him
of days.
What would Donald Trump talk
Bye,
about if
Rudy.
we
Have a
actually
good
did
night.
some
Bye,
of these
Rudy.
things? And they
See
need
you
to be
guys. See you,
done
Joey.
by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this.
This is a
Donald Trump
90-minute
had 4
debate, by
years.
the way.
He had 4 years to do this. And
Well,
he
that's gonna be fun.
promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a
They're
big,
moving. They're
beautiful
trucking.
wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But
Crazy
here we
eyes
are
now.
again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up.
What was that?
Senator, the question was,
What are
will
these
you
facial
separate parents
expressions?
from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a
Did you see
disgrace,
him, like,
and it
say-
has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And
I caught it
now
too,
that she's running for
FML.
president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield.
They're not
The
here
Republican
legally.
governor said,
No, they're
it's
on a
not
temporary
true. Gotta
status
do
of
it.
some sort.
There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We
I
could come
can't wait
together.
to hear him
Senator
rip
Langford
that
did it.
through.
We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize
It's
and
not legal. It's
villainize
still a
other human
violation of
beings.
constitutional law.
Tim,
Yeah, it's a
Governor,
major
your
violation.
time is
Well, I
up.
mean,
Senator, I'll give
Heather,
you
what
1
in our
minute, but
immigration law
let me
isn't a
just
violation of the
ask you
Constitution
the
at this
question
point?
first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything.
He's like turning red. He's literally
housing,
turning red.
We could talk a little bit about
like everybody's
Wall Street
seeing this, right?
speculators
Like
buying up housing and making them less affordable.
Visibly frustrated.
It becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary
He
to
likes
adjudicate.
this.
I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn now to the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border law. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we want to have
app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created.
Oh, now they're gonna fucking mute him. That is bullshit.
Because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you,
Man,
Margaret.
I'm going to use some Ainsley language here. Slay,
Each of your
Riz,
campaigns has
he
released an economic
cooked,
plan. So let's talk
he
about
ate
the
and left
specifics.
no
Governor
crumbs.
Walz, Vice
That
President
bitch
Harris
is
unveiled a plan that includes
toast.
billions in tax credits for manufacturing,
He
housing,
just
and
put,
renewed
yeah,
child tax credit.
100%.
The Wharton School says your proposals will
everybody
increase
just
the
got put in
nation's
their place.
deficit by $1.2 trillion.
I need JD Vance.
How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere.
Really
it's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by a third. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in.
And
Everyone
getting rid
agrees,
of
including
payroll
businesses,
tax.
it would be destabilizing it. It would increase inflation.
Taxing the money that you're going to get that's going to get taxed. Like, that's ridiculous.
For you, where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question
Deficit is not debt. Deficit is not debt. Deficit is not debt. Let's keep saying it, guys.
I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country.
You're right,
1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record.
True. My granddad was a fucking hard-ass colonel.
Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression.
Don't know the answer.
9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one.
Whether
it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted.
According to Google, Kamala Harris is 5'4".
Look, if you're going to be president,
5'4",
you don't have all the answers.
According to Google.
Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever.
Apparently he has a temper.
That you're paying your taxes every year.
Whatever.
Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years. And the last year as president. That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts, but those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a
I'm not
generation,
entirely
Donald
sure.
Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop. And we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look,
he
we
really
produce
is,
soybeans and
Chris.
corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this
he's got to be really
Donald
careful
Trump was the guy
about
who created
China.
the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much
He's
of
just
what the senator
opening the
said right there,
door.
I'm in agreement with him on
God,
this.
I'm glad
I
I'm
watched it
drinking
happen
wine
too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics show that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record,
I think that's why
which has
JD
made
keeps
gas,
turning and looking
groceries, and
towards
housing
the wall as he's
unaffordable
looking.
for
There must
American
be a
citizens.
clock.
I was raised by a woman
Or like
who
those
would
lights.
sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford.
No.
We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead,
I hope we have a conversation
gentlemen, on many
healthcare.
topics. But
Shut
right
up,
now, I
Pam
want to
Pam.
talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities.
Yeah, I agree.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89.
Why is
to
there not a
travel to
split
China.
screen right now?
35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers.
Why is he
and we
by
would go back and
himself?
forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect.
Can you explain
And
the
I'm a knucklehead at
discrepancies
times,
in your
but it's
trip to
always been
China?
about that. Those same people
He
elected
has
me
not
to
answered that
Congress
fucking question. I
for
love
12
that they have the
years.
question
And
down
in
at the
Congress,
bottom.
I was one of the most bipartisan people working on things like
It's
farm
actually a
bills
good
that we got
format
done,
note by
working on
CBS.
veterans benefits.
Yeah,
And then the people
CBS
of
has actually done
Minnesota
fairly
were
well.
able to
There's
elect
been
me
a
to
couple
governor
moments
twice.
where I've been like,
So
oh,
look,
come on,
my
bitch.
commitment
But
has
they've
been
been
from the
pretty good.
beginning to make
It's
sure
almost
that I'm there
irrelevant
for the
because he
people,
smacked
to
them
make sure that
down
I
so
get this
easily. It
right.
was
I
like,
will say more than anything. Many times I will talk
I
a
don't
lot.
like
I
that
will
they were
get
able
caught up in the
to.
rhetoric. But being there, the impact
To
it
cut the
made,
mic,
You
yeah.
the difference it made in
yeah.
my life. I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques
Not
of this.
like it.
I
Yeah.
would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I
I
guarantee you
agree,
he wouldn't
Chris,
be
100%.
praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a
And
trade
maybe
war
they
that he ends
have
up losing.
done
So this
seen
is
the lawn
about
of
trying to
JD and I
understand
dismissed
the
it
world.
or
It's
didn't
about
pay
trying
attention.
to do the
But
best
I
you can for your
certainly
community.
noticed that
And then it's
moment.
putting yourself out there
I'm
and letting your
monitoring
folks
X as well, so I'm
understand
kind
what
of
it
going
is.
back and forth
My
a little bit.
commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether
We're
it
going to
was
get to some
being
of
a
the
good
hilarious
soldier
stuff
or as
after
being
the
a good
debate that
member
I'm
of
seeing on
Congress,
X, if you
those
have
are the
time, because
things
it's
that I
pretty
think are the
funny.
values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the
No, just
discrepancy?
all I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance,
Wow.
in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump literally failed to deliver his economic populism.
Just
You're now
decide.
his running mate.
That's like
And
Bernie
you've said that
Sanders
many
doing
of
his
your
in the
policy
Soviet
stances
Union.
align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy
comes back to the economy. That's very good.
Yeah,
secure
Jake,
southern
that's
border,
a really
lot of things, frankly, that
fucking
I didn't think you'd be
bad.
able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up,
I
when you
hope that
misspeak,
more
when you
people
get
caught
something
that.
wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look.
What does the bill say then?
Issue is what's on.
But that wasn't what he was asked. What do you support is what he was asked.
It's all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade.
He's going to get fucking wrecked on this.
And then he tells us,
because if there's any subject that JD Vance is absolutely well versed on,
it's a beautiful
it's
thing.
abortion.
A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home.
That's not
got
an abortion.
sepsis,
That's a medical
nearly
necessity.
dies, and now she
Yeah,
may have
that's
difficulty
completely
having
different.
children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible,
Look at him.
to
He's
get
like,
contraception
let's do this.
and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included,
Donald Trump just
infertility
said he
treatments are
wants
why I
to
have a
make
child.
IVF
That's
available to
nobody else's
everybody.
business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree
Okay, so they
with everything that
Google
I've ever
shot on
said on this
JD.
topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening.
If you go
His
to
running mate,
Google
though, does not,
and you
that's
type
the problem.
Governor, your time
how
is up. Senator,
late
let me
can you
ask you
have
about
I'm gonna
that.
pause
He
this
mentioned,
for a
I think, referring to a national ban. In the past,
do that, but I just
This is kind of important for us to,
if you Google, so go to Google and type in, anybody who's watching right now can do this. How late can you have an abortion in Minnesota? The first result is Wikipedia, so I'm not going to go to that one. The next one is abortionfinder.org. So I click that state guide to abortion. It says abortion in Minnesota. Is abortion legal in Minnesota? Yes. Yes. Abortion is legal in Minnesota. There is no limit on abortion in Minnesota based on how far along in pregnancy you are. It clearly says that everyone can do the exact same search, the exact same link that I just did. There
I
is
just
no
did.
limit. The day that you are scheduled to give birth, you can go have your child murdered in the state of Minnesota. So he's a lying sack of shit. Sorry.
Trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are.
You're
to not be
pro-murder.
that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top
Why would
3
you
state
calculate that in a teen
for the
pregnancy
best
rate? That
place
doesn't
to
make any
raise
sense.
children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you
would
guys
be-
are
I saw the
pro-abortion,
same thing,
that's
Ken. I
not the
think I
case at
saw it on
all.
TikTok.
We are pro-freedoms for
sad.
women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not how the law
pro-abortion,
is.
that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We
That
can
was in
be
California.
a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best
Decisions
when
to
they
make
need
about their healthcare
trying
decisions.
to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point. That's not it at all.
What was I wrong
This
about,
was-
Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong
That
about?
is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for
I
children.
do not
It
like
doesn't
this
increase
man.
us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So yeah,
We just-
do with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on. And we're
Y'all,
going
it's Abortion Finder. Go look it up, please, and show anyone.
debate in just a moment.
But it
good.
does, in fact,
So
say.
now I can just share that with you guys. So here we go.
Yeah, please, Heather, because he's not
Well, I'm gonna-
it's right there. I mean, I would assume that
And then
is
I'm
that
gonna
website from a some kind of pro-abortion group. Like, yeah, I
share
would
this
imagine, right?
tab instead. Here you go. Right here. Very clearly. I'll even, you know what? I will go a step further because I love you fuckers that much.
Oh, we
I
love
will
you too.
zoom in for you. Right here, it very clearly states Yes, abortion is legal. There is no limit on abortion in Minnesota based on how far along in pregnancy you are. And then it goes even further. If you're in Minnesota and you need an abortion, there's no ban or limit on abortion in Minnesota based on how far along you are. It's all good. We got you. We will kill your baby for you. No big deal. Parental involvement, not required. If you're younger than 18, you can consent to an abortion. You do not have to notify your parent to kill your baby.
But if I remember correctly, in Minnesota, if you're under 18, you can consent to puberty blockers and that kind of thing too.
You know
So
what? Just for fucking funsies, let's call this 1-800 number. Let's do this.
how long do we have for the commercial?
I don't know, but we're
Okay.
going to go as fast as I can. 1-800-772.
Heather, you're going to need to clip this too,
91.
so that we can use it as content.
Speaker.
You have reached the National Abortion Hotline. The hotline is now closed. Please call back during our regular hours of operation from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday and Sunday Eastern Standard Time. Thank you.
Maybe I'll live stream that tomorrow, that conversation. Okay, so real quick, find a verified abortion provider. I need date of last period. Let's go back like 8 months ago. What month is this? This is October 1st, right? So
yeah. So
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'm about to do
6,
some math
7.
and figure out exactly when I was conceived here because my birthday is in.
So maybe like March 27th.
Is that 9 months?
Ish.
8 months. Yeah. Okay.
And then what just happened? Oh, here we go. Okay.
Minnesota, or just put in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. And I am, let's put that I'm 15 or younger. 26 weeks, 6 days pregnant. You cannot get an abortion in Minnesota. But if you travel out of state, you could get an abortion procedure. That's weird.
That's interesting. So it says on the site no, but now it says over here that you can. There's no limit, but then now it says you.
I wonder if it's because of the age. Let's do 18 or older. And then I'm actually going to put, I don't know. Find a provider.
May be offered throughout pregnancy.
Maybe offered through. So the pill you can take at 13 weeks. You can have the procedure throughout.
Maybe get a human on the phone tomorrow, Heather, and live stream it. And get some content.
That'd be fun. Yay. I do know Ken had just mentioned, so on TikTok, there's a girl who did that where she called a bunch of different oh shit. Sorry, let me switch.
I think I know which video you're talking about.
Epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms.
Okay, sorry.
Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible to curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions.
He's talking about the Michigan
There's going to be,
what were the parents' names?
the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools.
Yeah, Uncle David, I agree.
Lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. Mm-hmm. I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead. And they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out.
That we found out that Kamala did not, in fact,
enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background check. And
oh my God.
Data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks
Nate,
that
I just pulled
allow
up this article
to be even done on gun violence. And this idea
that's
that
so
we should just
sad.
live with it, and I here's what I do think.
That's what Vance was talking about, though, right?
Conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance
what kind of
hates
gun
it when these kids. It's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that, but that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense.
It really
Kamala
does.
Harris,
I had no idea about that. Thank you so much for sharing.
She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that you're doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could piss it on after football practice. That's not where we live today.
That's what you said, right?
I want to mention on this.
Yes.
Talking about cities and where it's at.
I became friends with
the number
shooters.
one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that. But I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns.
No,
and
it's not.
there are
No,
things
it's
that you
not.
can do about it.
Sorry.
But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation.
Look,
I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this.
Diagnosis of mental health issues
Protect the
is
Second
not
Amendment, protect our children. That's our
stigmatizing
priority.
it, okay?
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you,
My
Nora.
guns.
Let's turn
do
now to the
not
top
move
contributor to
unless I
inflation,
move them.
the high cost
You know what?
of
I'm going to need you
housing
guys to
and
do an
rent.
experiment this weekend. I
There's
want
a
you guys to
shortage
just
of
lay your
more than
guns
4
out
million homes in the United States,
and like order
and
them
that
to shoot.
contributes to the high
Like do that,
housing
please.
prices.
Like verbally, just have
Governor
everybody
Walz, the
Right.
give it a
Harris
couple
campaign
times. Maybe you
promises
do
a
it. Maybe you say it wrong the first time. Maybe
$25,000 down
after you-
payment assistance for first-time home buyers and
Yep.
a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because
I am behind. I need
with
to
staple housing end up with
the next
stable
little break or
people
whatever.
with
I'll
stable
fast
housing
forward so that
have their
we're caught
kids
up.
able to be able to get to school.
Sorry.
All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance,
He actually lives
as far as
fairly
your
meager,
campaign's
from
position,
what
the
I've
promise is to
understood.
seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build
By
all
meager,
the new homes you're
I
promising?
mean, he
and
moved
what
into
part
the
of
governor's
any of this
mansion and
plan
sold
will
his
provide
house.
immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is think about it. If a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build.
They've tried really hard not to give him airtime. Tonight,
building in this country.
absolutely
We have
decimates
a
the
lot
idea
of land that could
that
be
he's
used. We have a
weird.
lot of Americans that need homes. We should be
And,
kicking
you know,
out illegal
usually the
immigrants who
vice
are competing
presidential
for those
debate
homes,
doesn't
and we
move
should be
needles. I
building
mean,
more
generally
homes for
that's
the
the
American citizens
conventional wisdom
who
here.
deserve to be
But
here.
right now,
Senator,
people
your
are that
time is up.
undecided in
Governor,
places
I
like
do want to let you
Pennsylvania where ballots
respond
have
to
not
the
quite gone
allegation
out
that
yet.
the vice president is letting
This might do
in
it.
Well, of course, that's not
migrants,
true. And again,
that
you
it's
have the
affecting
facts. I
housing
guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump
He's
left
so
office.
mad.
But it's
He's
again
so mad that they won't help
blaming
him.
and not trying to find
Crossings are
solution. I was
down
gonna ask you
compared
on
to
this
when
question,
Donald Trump
are
left
we going to
office.
drill and build houses in the same federal land?
Thank God
And
they're
I think
not
when
fact
people hear
checking
federal
you.
lands, these are really important pieces of land.
JD Vance's
Now, Minnesota
face.
doesn't have a lot of
I
federal
know.
lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a
How
lot
do we
of federal lands
disincentivize large
in and around
corporations from buying up
Minneapolis, for example.
residentials only
So
to
the
rent them
issue is
back?
I don't understand the
Corporate
federal
buyups are
lands
drying
issue
up
unless we
single-family
see
home
this, and I
supply.
worry about this as
That's
someone who cares
actually
deeply
a really
about our
good
national
question.
parks and our
Preach.
federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands
Housing
protect.
is
They're there for a
unaffordable even
reason.
in
They belong to
Canada
all
due
of
to
us.
their love of
But
open
again, this is when
borders.
you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think
Are
there's
you
better ways to do
actively
this. We've seen it in
suggesting you're
Minnesota
a
where they've
fucking
refurbished some of
communist?
these houses. We're
That's
able to make
exactly
some
what he just
investments.
said.
That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor,
Where's the
your
study?
time is
It
your
was
time is
just
up.
said
But
by
Senator,
your
on that point,
fucking-
I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Jerome
There's a
Powell just
Federal
came out and
Reserve
said
study
that
that
they're
we're
the
happy to
largest
share after the
contributor to
debate. We'll put it up
inflation.
on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of
They were
doers.
all
We're a
wearing
country of
Biden
explorers.
shirts.
But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen.
But they're enforced by alphabet
to get to. You're
agencies.
passionate about the housing crisis.
Yeah, I agree,
can tell.
FML.
But Nora?
It's been a
Thank
very
you.
good debate.
One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at
Fuck
the
them
last
hoe-ass
presidential debate,
roads.
former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, I have concepts of a plan. Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
They should
Well, of
pay
course,
more.
we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family
this
actually
is a
got private
subject
health insurance,
where
at least for
I
the
don't
first
have enough
time,
wine
switched
for
off of
it.
Medicaid onto private insurance
Is
for the
this where
first
we get
time
insurance
under
writer,
Donald
Heather?
Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have
You're really
criticized this
fucking close to
concepts of a
her.
plan remark. I think it's very simple common sense. I think it's Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress.
I just
You're not
got my
gonna propose
fucking
a
renewals
900-page
today,
bill
so
standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was
Chris, it very well
actually
might.
president, and again, he has a record to be proud of,
At least,
prescription drugs
in those
fell in
places where
2018
500
for the
votes are
first
really going
time
to
in a
matter.
very long time.
Yeah.
Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were
Chris, I
up
think
about
you're right.
1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency.
Very
Think about
even
healthcare. You go
keeled,
into a hospital,
very
you try to
demure,
buy something,
very
and nobody
mindful,
knows what it actually
very
costs. That price
cutesy.
transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along.
God,
I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do. But I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order
because it's made insurance almost completely unfucking
he signed
affordable.
on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time.
Medically underwritten insurance was much higher for females than it was for males.
Ones that'll be there. But
with
look,
ACA,
this issue,
no matter if you're male
when
or
Donald
female,
Trump said,
based off of your
I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But
is that because of care during pregnancy, or
it is because women go to the doctor more? Life insurance is cheaper for women because we die later in life.
What they're saying
so the actuarial information suggests that women are going to live longer.
So what they're going to do
health
is
insurance is much more expensive for women because we go to the fucking doctor. Men don't.
Premium, it's not much. They're figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
You can always tell what subjects really fire Chris up.
How you would protect people with pre-existing
conditions. Because he starts typing in all caps.
All caps.
Look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better.
The decision in
Governor Walz just said is actually not true.
A
lot of what
I think at some point in time, I'm going to do an entire space or live stream
the exchanges.
on
Donald Trump
healthcare
actually helped
so that
address
people
that
can
problem, and he
understand we
did
are
so in a
5
way
years
that
away
preserved
from
people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But
single
again,
payer healthcare.
something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald
5 to
Trump
10
becomes
years.
president, all of these terrible
You heard it here
consequences are going to
first.
ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then
So
what
you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be
That
able to
got
afford it
repealed,
get there,
the
and we
Trump
make sure then
administration.
when you get
I've-
sick and old,
I don't
it's there for
necessarily
you.
think
Because I heard
that's a
people say, well, I
talking
don't
point for
I don't
either
want to buy
party at
into
this point.
Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying healthcare once you get past 70. So look,
Yeah.
the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
First
you,
time
Margaret.
you
Can I
fucking
ask-
repealed
I
it whenever
apologize.
you,
We're out of
Go
time.
ahead,
We have a
Nora.
number of subjects to discuss. Margaret,
Let's talk about families.
every time he gets a
in
chance to
America.
repeal or
There is a
respond,
child
we
care
got too much to
crisis
cover. We got
in
too
this
much to cover.
country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the
That
advantages of my wife,
this
is
is like the
extraordinarily difficult.
quintessential
And it's not
quote
just
for
difficult from
Tim
a policy
Walz.
perspective. She actually had
Cradle to
access to
grave
paid family leave
welfare.
because she worked for a bigger company. But the
Tommy.
cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare, because look, it is unacceptable. And, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month.
There shouldn't
So I want
be
to
a
get your
national
thoughts
mandate
on
on
this.
anything. The 10th
President
Amendment there on
Trump
purpose.
recently
Leave
said,
local politics to the
as
state.
much as childcare is
Agreed,
talked
Nate.
about as being
Whew,
expensive,
could
it's
not agree more.
relatively speaking
Fox News is
not
going through
very
my life
expensive
after the
compared to
list.
the kinds of numbers we'll be taking. Is
To be
President Trump
honest, I'm still
committed
laughing in
to
my
the
own head at Karen
$5,000 per
Boyce.
child
The
tax credit
moderators gave
that
him
you
when he
have
called him out
described?
Disney
You have 1
fast
minute.
pass
Well,
immigrant
what President
chat.
Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families, cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the childcare shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the childcare shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide childcare options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Because you have so much
Thank
red
you, Senator.
tape around
Governor Walz,
the facilitation
your
of
ticket
it.
also has some childcare tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe
Not
they're not.
one.
When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometimes,
fairly
but
smart.
they will lead with childcare and they will lead
I didn't
with
even
housing,
fucking understand
because we
what
know the
words
problem is,
just came
especially
out
in a
of
state
his
like
mouth.
Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the
We
workers.
need Trump right there. I don't know what he said. I don't even think he knows what he just said.
I don't think he does
Let's
either.
talk about the state
And
of
then, of course,
democracy,
we've
the
got so
top
much to
issue
cover.
for Americans
You
after the
gotta move on.
economy
JD, you
and
cannot
inflation.
respond.
After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents,
Can't be
looked at the
accurate or
evidence
truthful.
and said
Be
there
fast
was
and
no
desperate.
widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of
This
electors
would have
to
been a Trump
Congress
question.
for
JD
January
Vance
6th.
nor Tim Walz were
Senator
either one
Vance,
involved
you
with
have
this.
said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country,
is a
but
bad
unfortunately,
answer on
it's
JD's
not the
part.
threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because
it's
of
a great
disagreements
deflection,
over
but
politics.
it does not
It's
answer
big
the question.
technology companies silencing their fellow
Would you
citizens.
challenge
And
the
it's Kamala
election
Harris
results?
saying that
Just
rather
say
than
yes
debate
if
and
I think that
persuade her
they're
fellow Americans, she'd
illegal,
like to censor
and I'm
people who
entitled to
engage
do
in
so.
misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar
It is a
Democrats,
loaded question,
to have the
guys.
endorsement
I
of
agree
Bobby
with you.
Kennedy
I think
Jr.
this
and
is.
Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong
I
leaders
still
in the
don't like
Democratic
how he's
coalition. And
answering
of
it,
course,
though.
they don't agree with me and Donald Trump
I
on
mean, they
every
just asked
issue.
him when he
We don't
stopped
have
beating
to
his
agree
wife,
on every.
basically.
But
And
we're
they'll
united
reiterate
behind
it
the
when he
basic
finishes talking.
American
They'll be
First
like,
Amendment
the question
principle
was.
that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues.
Yeah,
And that, to
I
me, is a
agree,
much bigger
guys.
threat to
The party of
democracy
Al
than
fucking
what Donald
Gore
Trump
has no
said
business
when he
ever
said that
asking such a
protesters should
question.
peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Ooh,
Well, I've
she didn't
enjoyed
make him
tonight's
answer
debate,
it.
and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator. But
me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because
God, the
I think we need to tell the story.
humanization has
Donald
been
Trump
really good
refused
for
to
JD
acknowledge this,
Vance.
and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the
He-
pot, boiling water go up. He was very
The
clear.
question here is going to be, which of these men do you want a heartbeat away from the presidency?
140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag. Several later
140
died. And it
officers?
wasn't
Is that what
just
you just
in there.
said?
That's what he just said.
Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, "We're marching to the governor's residence, and there may be casualties." The
140
only person
officers
there was my
were
son and his
beaten
dog,
within
who
an
was
inch of
rushed
their
out
life.
crying by state police.
Sorry, I'm taking
That
notes.
issue,
Okay.
and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election.
It's not a
You
democracy.
shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's
It's a
what
fucking
was at stake here.
constitutional
Now,
republic,
the thing
you
I'm most
piece of
concerned about
fucking
is
shit.
the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork
Oh,
for
let's talk
people
about
not accepting this.
imprisoning
And
political
a
opponents.
president's words matter. A president's words
140
matter.
officers
People hear that.
inch of their
So
life.
I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on
140
January 6th,
officers
the first
injured
time
in Capitol
American
riot. That's how it
history
finishes the.
that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
I will say,
January
from a
6th
fact
was
check
not
perspective,
Facebook ads.
according to the
And I think
DOJ's
revisionist
website,
history on this. Look,
United States
I
Attorney's Office, District of
don't
Columbia,
understand how we got to this
approximately
point.
140
But the
officers
issue
were
was that
assaulted
happened.
at January 6th
Donald Trump didn't do it.
Capitol.
And all of us say
That's
there's
the first
no
time I've
place
ever
for
heard
this.
that.
It has massive
So-
repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something. That's
It's
not
the first
that's
time
not
I've heard it,
censorship.
too.
Censorship is book
But I
banning.
do want to be
We've
fair.
seen that.
and
We've seen
we
that
did
brought
fact
up.
check it.
I just think for
It is on the DOJ's
everyone
website.
tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested
not a
itself because of
democracy.
Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack
the tree of
us
liberty
for
must
not
be
believing in democracy.
refreshed
The
from
most
time to
sacred
time with
right
the blood
under the
of
United States
patriots and
democracy
tyrants,
is the
man. Like,
First
we're
Amendment.
not
You yourself have said
not a
there's
weak
no First
people.
Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the
threatening or
power
hate
of
speech.
government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then
Tim
let's
is
come
like, please
together
stop.
afterwards.
Please
You can't
stop.
yell fire in a crowded theater.
Yes, you can.
That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the
masks.
governor does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I
He's
think
not
Kamala
the
Harris would
fucking
agree. She
incumbent.
wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that. Because of course that's what we would
They
do.
keep saying, like,
So
are you
America,
going to
I
be
think
okay
you've
with
got
the
a
peaceful
really clear
transfer of
choice on
power?
this election.
I'm
of
not in
who's gonna
fucking
honor that
power, you
democracy
idiot.
and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News Vice Presidential debate continues.
Why?
Okay, so I mean, look.
Wait, real quick. Quick plug.
Yeah.
If you guys, all 580 of you who are tuning in right now, are interested, there's a QR code at the top right-hand corner of your screen, and that is to go see Palmetto State Armory, my favorite people in the whole world. They have some great daily deals going on right now. All you have to do is scan that, go, and I get 5% of anything that you purchase, and that money goes towards things like this and my ability to put on a show for you and dance around like a fucking monkey on a podcast and pretend that you care anything about what I have to say. So go visit Palmetto State Armory. We're here to arm the people. Go ahead, Joey.
He also brought up book banning. I don't know if you caught that.
I missed
Walz.
it.
Yeah, so Walz brought up book banning. And if somebody can please tell me, like, if there is a book somewhere in the United States that if you're caught in possession of it, you will be arrested. My @ is right there. You can see my @ please @ me at Twitter. Like, you can, please tell me, where are these books banned in the United States right now? There are no books banned in the United States right now. We don't want porn being given to children in school. If you want porn being given to children in school, you are a groomer.
Yeah, okay. So here's my thing with this. Obviously, I mean, Ainsley is in public school. Finnegan is now in public school. And this notion that books are banned, for example, let me give you guys a quick little example here. So Ainsley is in an advanced honors English class.
Mhm.
And the first book that they read is Tom Sawyer. And as we're going through the open house, the teacher is talking to us and she's like, yeah, we're going to read Tom Sawyer, but it's an abridged version. It's an edited version because, these kids are just so young. And I'm like, they're fucking 12. They're in an advanced English class for a reason. Why would you not be using the actual book? We had to sign a little fucking permission slip that allowed you to read the book to them. It's because they didn't want to use the N-word in class. And
Okay.
So, okay, you don't want to use the N-word in class, but you want my daughter to be able to go down to the library and read the book about scissoring and fucking whatever. Like, what fucking universe do we live in where you're justifying one thing in school but not another? An actual like historical representation of how society was. And then in the next breath you're like, but we want them to be able to read about sex and gender and what the fuck ever. And it's like, bro, if you want that, go to fucking Amazon. You can order it for your kids. It's not fucking banned.
100%. Your kid, if you want to supply those materials to your children, then they're available wherever books are sold. I imagine. I don't go looking for these things, but keep them out of schools. Look, I understand if you don't want to use the racial language in the classroom because you're uncomfortable using that language. That's fine. If you're doing the read alouds or the popcorn reads or whatever you do, just have the kids. You tell the kids, just say N-word and that's it. Like, you don't have to use the word, but it's important for the kids to read at least the original versions because they need to understand that racial animus was a part of our history and it's something that we have moved past. On the other side of that, we don't want kids having access to these pornographic books teaching them about sex in schools. It's not appropriate, just bottom line. But none of these books are banned, Heather, and that's the point. You can buy them. You can go to Barnes & Noble and buy them. You can go on Amazon and buy them. They are not banned.
Right.
And you can say gay in Florida.
CBS News Vice Presidential
It's
Debate.
like the
it is now time for the closing
fucking
statement.
words. We're in
Senator Vance
1984
won the
real
virtual
life.
coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most
it?
importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here.
It is not
I'm
a
as
fucking
surprised as
democracy.
anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between
Taylor
there.
Swift.
And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you that that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something, not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about
Are you going to
American
bed?
carnage.
Yeah,
And then he
Dad wouldn't let
spent
me.
4 years trying to maybe do that.
He's leaving.
Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning
This was
in
a
this
pretty good
evening. And
debate. I'm
one
not
of the
going to
issues we
lie.
didn't talk about was
No, I
energy.
enjoyed it.
And I remember when I was
Well
being raised by my
moderated.
grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that too has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
I am going to
And I'm
hang
Nora O'Donnell.
for
and a
those that
reminder,
are
there
tuning
just
in
35 days
to listen
until
to some
Election
of the
Day.
callers,
Please get out and vote.
like we
And
did
for
last
all of us
time.
here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
Hope you guys are cool with that.
I gotta be honest with you guys. I really wish that this was these two were running for president.
We're running for president. I know, me too.
That was a very substantive debate.
Yep. It was. I would still be voting for JD Vance. Not
100%. Yeah.
Tim Walz, or Walz, however the fuck you say his name. Okay. Like Timmy won't stand with Kamala's. A new way forward. I'm so tired of hearing that from them. Yes. Meg, okay, so the unfortunate thing is I can't hit hotly. I can't hit link. So then I have to go try to type it in and then yeah. But Nate, I will go find it after the stream is over. Don't go there. I think it's more powerful to go to the Weekend at Bernie's approach. I agree, Joey. It was much more civil and informative debate. Sorry.
Yeah.
No. Don't apologize. I'm just telling you, I can't click it, so I don't know what it is that she's saying. Okay.
Handshakes all around between the candidates,
go.
their spouses,
and the moderators.
So for those
at
of you that
tonight's
don't
first and
know,
only
I'm
vice
streaming
presidential
from
debate
C-SPAN.
hosted by
So now
CBS. The
regular,
first
average, everyday
square-off between
Americans
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and
will
Ohio
be
Senator
calling
J.D.
in and
Vance,
kind of giving
now
their
in the
feedback and
history
what
books.
they
The two
thought of the
vying for the
debate.
second
I am
highest office in
very
the land
curious to
exchanged
hear
ideas on
some of these
several topics,
calls.
ranging from the conflict in the Middle East, the economy,
The tweet that
and
Nate shared,
immigration.
by the way, from Megyn
Moderators
Kelly,
Nora
Yeah.
O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan
says, "State
pressing
of
the
democracy.
candidates
No. Why
both
did you
on
sign
multiple
a law,
topics.
Governor Walz,
Now
to
a
allow
live
parents to
look
lose
from
custody
C-SPAN
if
cameras
they
on
don't,
the
quote
ground
unquote,
in New York
confirm
City
confused kids'
inside the
gender
spin room,
confusion?
where
No one
we
will
are
ask.
anticipating
No one gives a
reaction
shit."
from
And that's
surrogates
true.
for the Trump
No one
Vance
wants to ask
and
that
Harris
question.
Walz campaigns, each expected to explain why their candidates outperformed the other. We'll be bringing you all the highlights from there for the next hour. We, of course, want to have a conversation with all of you as well, your reaction to tonight's debate. If you're supporting the Harris Walz ticket, dial in at 202-748-8920.
Thank you for tuning in,
supporting
Tex.
the
Thank you
Trump
for stopping by and
Vance
tuning in,
ticket, dial
Chris.
in at
We appreciate both of you,
202-748-8921. If you're
Chris.
voting for
Next
another
time,
candidate,
hopefully
different
you'll
one,
be able to
dial in
come
at
on with us.
202-748-8922. If you don't want to call, you can text at 202-748-8903. Tonight, over on C-SPAN 2, we are going to be simulcasting with one of our cable affiliates the Spectrum News post-debate coverage. They're going to have
I wonder if I
analysis
can
and
get
reporters from
in.
across the country over on C-SPAN 2. Here, a conversation with all of you. And let's hear from David, who's in Los Angeles, Democratic caller. David, your reaction to the debate.
Actually, I thought it was pretty good for a vice presidential debate. I was very surprised. Yes, I'm going to vote for Walz. I do want to make it clear when I saw at the end that Vance was talking about Donald Trump's achievements. It seems that they seem to forget the year 2021, and it just goes by the wayside. It gets, I think that the idea of all the stuff that happened during COVID is being gaslighted to the American public.
Biden was
David, what surprised you? You said you
2021.
were surprised by this debate.
Both of them spoke extremely eloquently, as much as I'm not
This
really
dude
a
went to
big
the
fan of
dispensary
J.D.
earlier.
Vance, but Walz in particular had his stuff down. He answered questions in a way that didn't seem rushed. He didn't seem, what's the word I'm
It's
looking for?
amazing sometimes the
He didn't
cognitive
come across
dissonance
angry.
of realizing
I
that you
do know that
watched a
Vance
completely
did
different
appear
fucking
to
debate.
be,
Do you guys
like
see what I deal
Trump,
with here in
a
LA
bit
now?
peeved when something was brought up that didn't go along with their agenda. They push back with, alternative, what I would call the Kellyanne alternative facts. But, I'll give him credit for a lot of stuff that he has tried to
Good
stand
night,
up
Nate.
for, even though he's flip-flopped a lot. You're talking about a man who
Bro, did we watch the same
American
debate?
Hitler, which is really, really shocking when you think about where he's at right now.
All right, David, so
And
let me ask you this. What grade would you give each of the candidates tonight for their debate performance?
I'll give Walz, I'll give him probably an A- because I'll never give anybody an A+. And I'll give J.D. Vance a C at the best. I think he did average.
What?
He tried, but I think he was
Look at
outmatched
her
for
face.
sure. He just did not realize
This guy's fucking
that
delusional. Sorry,
this
delusional.
school teacher and coach from Minnesota was going to run rampant over him.
All right, David's thoughts there on how these candidates perform. Let's go into the spin room in New York City. Colorado Governor Jared Polis talking to reporters.
J.D. Vance did not distance himself from Donald Trump, so there's no one there to stand up to Donald Trump's worst instincts. and potentially a threat to our democracy itself. Tim Walz brought that home on issues that matter to the American people, saving people money on groceries, on costs, on healthcare, on housing, on issue after issue. Tim Walz
B
put out
said
his
this dude
detailed
is a
plans of Kamala
player.
Harris. J.D. Vance tried to imitate those plans, but he didn't really speak to his boss because many of that stuff is not what Donald Trump stands for.
Governor, do you think that Governor Walz sort of spoke clearly enough about his comments that he made about where he was for the Tiananmen Square massacre? Do you think that book is closed, or do you think he'll have more to answer?
Well, I mean, look, this was 1998, I believe, and if he got the month off by a minute, I mean, do any of us know exactly where we were in a particular month in 1998? He was in Hong Kong. It was around the time, whether it was a week or two later. I think that, what it's really about is the plan for the future. And obviously, this is somebody who's had deep experiences, whether it was serving in the U.S. Army Reserves, whether it was being a coach, being a teacher, serving in the
Yeah,
United
it's
States Congress for 12
crazy.
years, or as a governor for 6.5 years. He's ready day one to stand alongside Kamala Harris as a governing partner to move our country forward.
Yeah, apparently Gavin Newsom's not there.
Anything else?
Anything else? Nope. We really don't have shit to say to you, Jared.
Governor Jared Polis there in the spin room in New York City. You heard him
Does
getting asked
not
about
look
the
very
Minnesota governor's response to a question from the
lively in there.
moderators about his
No, it
previous
doesn't.
comments about Tiananmen Square and where he was at the time. Tim Alberta, who writes for The Atlantic, his take on the governor's answer during the debate, a malpractice that Walz didn't have a sharp, succinct answer to the Tiananmen Square question ready to go, is what Tim Alberta says about that response. We want to get your take on the debate tonight. Let's go to Maxwell in Ohio, Republican.
Hello.
Hi, Maxwell. How do you think the candidates did?
I think they both did pretty well, but I got to say I was more leaning towards Vance's side.
And why?
I think he was more well-spoken and attacked the questions at hand more thoroughly.
What did you like about the way he delivered his responses tonight?
I think it was clear, concise, and straight to the point. Seemed pretty level-headed. And for the most part, wasn't willing to just fully defend everything that Trump said, had his own takes on everything.
And you
That was
appreciated that. You liked that? Or do you think he should have been more full-throated support for the former president?
I like that he's his own man in the sense of the debate, in the sense of American politics.
Okay, Maxwell's there in Ohio, Republican. Back into the spin room, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly in support of the Harris-Walz ticket.
Just as a point of clarification, though, Tiananmen Square was in 1989, not 1998,
Yeah.
April of 1989. So Jared Polis is a dumbass.
Do you think that Walz delivered tonight? Do you think he hit the home run that he needed to hit?
100%. I think he hit the grand slam on that issue. Made it perfectly clear.
I mean, this is so bullshit
where
because
Donald Trump and J.D. Vance stand.
God, this drives me crazy.
They
This
do not
this is
stand
called
with American
the
women.
spin
And
room.
it is
Like that's
putting
what it's called.
women at risk.
Where
There
you're
are
trying
women
to
dying,
then have your biggest
dying across our
advocate
country.
stand in a room and talk to
Governor
the
Walz
cameras
mentioned one of them,
and say,
Georgia,
"Oh yeah, he did
who has
so great.
died
He did so
because
good."
Donald
Where you're
Trump
literally
took away the right
propagandizing
of a
your
woman to
side,
make this decision
Republican
on her
or
body.
Democrat, either one.
Senator,
That's the
was
sole
governor's
purpose
answer
of this
on
room,
China good enough
is to be a mouthpiece for your party.
about whether he was actually there in 1989 during the
So you're talking. I think the question is,
God, they're hammering
June
them
or
on the
August
Tiananmen Square
or
question. I didn't
July
think
in
that would get as much
1989?
play as it has.
From CNN and others was that he had multiple times misrepresented.
So you're talking about a month, 35 years ago. So it was 35 years ago, and it's like, which month was he there? I don't think the American people care about that.
Senator, who won this debate and why?
Well, Tim Walz, because he has a vision, and he articulated that vision in
No, he
plain
didn't.
spoken language, compared to JD, who is a Yale-trained, microphone for Donald Trump, who
A Yale-trained
I think he
microphone.
was somewhat transparent about some of the things that are in Project 2025. On the issue of abortion, it's clear that they're not. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are
What
not
month were you
sticking
in
up for
space,
American
Mark? Can you
women
not remember the
and their health.
experience? You have.
And literally, their
Hey, Senator
lives are at
Kelly,
risk. We've
is
seen a
Project
woman in
2025 in the room
Georgia
with you
die
right
because
now?
Donald Trump
Is it
broke
Me
Roe
and
v.
the
Wade.
doll
He
wear.
claimed that
Project
himself. He
2025
put in
for
Supreme
you.
Court
Is
justices
it
with a
saying mean
specific
things to
plan
you? Is it telling you to
take
hurt
this
yourself or
fundamental right
others?
away from people.
Right.
And I think it was pretty
These
obvious
people, I mean, it's just,
in the
it's
debate
truly
tonight,
amazing. I mean,
who is going to stand with American women and who doesn't really care
Jake,
about
I
their health
just
care.
saw this
Senator, do you
picture
have any
that you
breaking news
sent.
Senator Mark Kelly there. You heard him say that he believes it was the Minnesota governor who won tonight's
fucking great,
debate.
man.
We are getting your thoughts on who won. Gray in Denton, Texas, independent.
Yep, that's
What do
what
you
I
say?
wanted.
Hi, this is Ray. I definitely think that from watching what
All right, caller, we're going to move on. Phil in Queens, Democratic caller. Hi, Phil.
Hi, yes, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I worked for McGovern. I worked for Jimmy Carter, turned 100. I worked for Ramsey Clark, Mo Udall. Over the years, I became more conservative, but I still, even local liberals, I vote for, I work for and with. But this debate, CBS did not ask questions about so many issues that are really at stake here, and including crime, including more on the economy. And quite frankly, I was surprised at how well Governor Walz did. He's much smarter than Vice President Harris. But I thought that Vance really showed he's a very vibrant, brilliant young man who has total control of the
This
Thank you
happened
the
to us
cable and
last
satellite
time.
companies who provide C-SPAN to viewers as a
Motherfucker.
public service.
Following tonight's debate. Tonight, with just over
Wait,
a
hold
month to
on.
go until Election Day.
Pause. Let's go back to C-SPAN. And so they're not gonna let us. Wait, hold on.
Thank you to the cable and
Maybe because
satellite
it's the
companies who provide
simulcast, you
C-SPAN
have
to
to log
viewers
off
as
of
a
it.
public
Give me
service.
like 2 seconds and see if I
Sports
can
politics, Tim. And so Josh, in fact, I mean, it's a worldwide news organization, and the biggest story in the world right now, the missile attacks on Israel. And they brought that up right off the bat. We've got some sound about how both candidates responded.
But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition,
It doesn't
able to
work.
stop the
It's like
incoming
when the
attack.
calls start coming
But
in, and
what's
this happened
fundamental
last
here
time
is
too. It
that steady
doesn't let
leadership
me.
is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald.
Okay, what did you make of that response?
Well, he misspoke there. I think he meant the expanse of Iran and its proxies in the region. But
Okay,
apart
I'm
from
not
that,
gonna watch this.
what Walz was really trying to say.
I just really wanted the
because we want to hear from the
people.
independents, especially. Like, we want to hear what independents are taking away from that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we're all kind of baked in voters, I think, here at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know who's watching. I mean, obviously we're on X and YouTube and Rumble right now, but you want to hear from independent voters. You want to hear what they're thinking, because at the end of the day, the question that you should be asking yourself with the vice presidential debate is which of these two men is going to be better being a heartbeat away from the presidency. I get that Harris is young, but things happen. Trump is not young. Things obviously happen. I mean, man's been shot at twice now.
Right.
So who can step in and calmly be president? And I think the answer to that is JD Vance.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own, and I kind of teed this up at the beginning of the hour, or fucking 90 minutes ago. I'm biased, obviously. I do not support Kamala or Tim Walz in any way, shape, or form. I am actually really happy to see, even in the spin room, almost every single question that is coming towards any of these mouthpieces is, why couldn't he give an answer about Tiananmen Square?
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't he talk about his ties to China? Which tells me that this whistleblower report that recently came out is getting more play than we think it is.
That might be the October surprise that really does it. I mean, obviously we have what we have Iran, but I mean that's not really an October surprise. It's not controlled. That just kind of happened.
I
But
don't know. Did you see Hillary Clinton's little thing about Kamala?
she said something about an October surprise, didn't she?
She did. And actually, I need to go find the clip and let you listen to it. But she's talking and she's like, they're coming out with something really bad about Kamala, but whatever it is, the media needs to do a really good job of just showcasing that that's not true.
I mean, but realistically,
Implying she already knows what the October surprise is. And media, you need to be prepared to shoot it down, keep it quiet, don't talk about it.
but the
And it was
realistic,
about Kamala, not about Tim.
well, and the realistic side of that is that if the Trump campaign has something, they've got like 2 days before, like, you know, because the ballots are going out.
Yeah.
Mine should be here next week. So I don't count because I'm of course voting for Trump. But if for Pennsylvania, I believe their ballots are out or going to be out.
So did you see Scott Pressler's post today about the election board not approving registrations?
Yeah, because they're understaffed in Luzerne County or something.
Yeah. So that's interesting too.
Oh, it's fascinating. And I mean, the work that he's done in Luzerne, Bucks, and what's the other county that
The
he did?
entire state of
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, for being honest.
Pennsylvania is likely going to be decided by something crazy like 10,000 votes. So I believe that was that the margin in 2020? It was something like
Yeah.
that. It's tiny. It's a tiny, tiny
It's
margin.
tiny in every state. It's like 20,000 in Wisconsin, 30 or 40,000 in Michigan, 20,000 in Pennsylvania, like fucking 1,000 or 3,000 in Georgia.
That is I mean,
Yeah.
guys, we're talking about, I mean,
razor thin.
I guess maybe like 5 or 6 square blocks in LA. Like that is how many votes are going to determine
An
this
entire
election.
state. Yeah.
An entire state. Yeah, in an entire state. Like it.
So I'm going to use this opportunity. The celebrities tell you all, go register to vote, go vote for Kamala, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't care who you vote for. It is your personal decision, your personal opinion. I am not going to tell you to vote for one party or the other. You have the ability to make that decision for yourself. But the one thing that I get probably more furious and more frustrated about is the level of apathy in politics today.
100%.
We are all suffering right now. I don't care if you're a millionaire, you still have to buy groceries. And it's still cutting into your millions and millions of dollars that you have harder than it is if you are not buying groceries, whatever. My point is that we do have the ability to affect change one way or the other. If you want more inflation, go vote for it. If you want more government taking care of you, go vote for it. But I mean, like, obviously, like, I think you shouldn't. But I think that participating in the system is so vitally important at this point. I cannot stress enough, if you have not registered to vote, if you were thinking, I'm just going to sit this one out because I don't really like either one of them, please go do something. Please go work at the polls. Go take 2 friends to the polls. Go to a nursing home. Take somebody. I am begging you to participate in the system, because apathy is where we have what? Fucking 3 million people deciding who the president is for a country that has way more people than that in it. It's sad.
It's very sad. You know, guys, we're all hurting right now. Everyone's hurting right now. The economy is being held together basically by duct tape at this point, and not the good duct tape, like Walmart brand duct tape. We're in for some hard times. We are, regardless of who wins this election. The question is, who will be in power, and what will they try to do to use a crisis to reshape things in their image, in the America that they want. That's what we're looking at right now.
I'm sorry, Joe, I'm going to interrupt one more time. So I'm telling you to go vote, but I'm telling you to also educate yourself. Like, I caught myself today. I almost retweeted something that I had seen on another application. I think I was on Facebook or TikTok. I can't remember. And I saw it and I was like, oh my God. So I went to go share it on Twitter, and no bullshit, it was in the drafts. And I was just about to hit send. And I was like, this seems a little far-fetched. So then I went and I started digging a little bit. And I was like, oh, it's not real. It's not true. It's fake. Not going to post it. So I deleted the tweet before I sent it out. I am begging you, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, an anarchist, a libertarian, I don't care what your position is. Please go research the subjects that are important to you and what the different candidates are supporting on those positions. What they've actually said, not the clip and the snippet that you've seen or heard on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter or whatever platform you're listening on or looking at for your news. Go find the full interview, the full context of the things that you're hearing about, because it's crucial at this point. It is so crucial on both sides. Like I said, I don't care what you support. I just want you to participate in the system.
Absolutely. Just, and go and research down ballot races. Your life is going to be affected way more by who the school board is. Your life would be affected way more by who's elected dog catcher in a small town than it's going to be than it should be by who is in the White House. So Ballotpedia, really kind of helps people that are just really struggling or that, aren't too super politically engaged. But look these people up. Check their X accounts, like check their social media. Like everyone, unfortunately, feels a need to post everything about their life. That includes people running for office. If Susie running for school board has an Instagram that's like 30% her dog, but then like 50% her at pro-Palestine protests, then obviously, you can make your judgment based on that.
So I'm really glad that you brought up local elections. I have a podcast I'm recording tomorrow with Sheriff Mack. His bio really is Mack and Prince versus the U.S. Supreme Court. And it was a ruling that he actually won on the 10th Amendment. He's a sheriff, and it's about using your sheriff to fight back against the federal government. So he's coming on my show tomorrow. So be on the lookout. I probably won't get that out until after IndiePoc because I won't have time to edit it. But it really showcases what we can do locally to push back against the central government, the federal government, intruding in our lives. So there is, in my personal opinion, there's no more important election for you to participate in than your local county sheriff. And I really genuinely mean that.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I'm gonna go look for that episode.
I think we're recording. I'm not doing it live. I'm gonna record it. So we're gonna meet at 1:00 tomorrow. So I may be able to get out before IndiePoc, but I'm not sure.
All right. I mean, don't stress yourself out. You have a lot to do.
I know. I still have my episode with Hotep Jesus that I need to get out to, and I haven't done that yet. Imposter syndrome is just like fucking demon that lives inside of my head where it's like, who the fuck do you think you are?
Well, it could be worse, Heather. You could just have said to millions of people on national television that you made friends with school shooters. So
big facts. Thank you guys so much to everyone who is tuning in right now. We have almost 700 listeners, which is fucking mind-blowing to me that you guys care enough to tune in. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Joey can be found at Joey, and I never say your last name right. So _ Makasiab is how I say his name, but that's completely wrong. And B, of course, is just hanging out in here. He's crazy. He's our resident hippie. He didn't say a single fucking word this whole time because he was probably high as a fucking kite and has already passed out at this point. So it's all good.
No, he's right here.
Bro, why have you been so quiet?
I didn't know I was supposed to talk.
Oh my God. That's what you come in here for.
Oh, I was just letting y'all two go at it and just hanging out and listening.
Oh, I love you, B.
We love you, B.
Thank you guys so much. You guys take care. Have a wonderful night. Don't forget, no other content this week. No book club, no happy hour because Indiana Apocalypse starts on Thursday evening. I love you guys. You guys take care. Be kind to one another and go vote.